It's my birthday. I'm thinking about it. You never got me nothing.
Look, what's that?
You never bought me nothing in your whole life, Yayo.
Hey, look, big ring.
I can imagine.
That's not true.
I only been around 8 years and I made it low, so I can imagine how much you make.
Jim Jones just stepped into a conversation he probably should have left alone. And now Uncle Murda is making sure he regrets it. This whole thing started when Tony Yayo made a simple observation during an interview about how 50 Cent treats his people compared to Jay-Z. And somehow Jim Jones decided that was his cue to start throwing shots. What he didn't expect was for Uncle Murda to come through and expose the actual truth about both camps. Because unlike a lot of people talking online, Murda has literally been signed to both sides. He's seen how Jay moves, he's seen how 50 moves. And what he had to say got the entire internet going crazy. So let me walk you through exactly how this whole situation unfolded, because there's a lot more to this than just a few comments on social media. It all started when Tony Yayo sat down for an interview and got real about something that a lot of people in the industry have noticed but rarely say out loud. Yayo was talking about loyalty in hip-hop, and specifically how 50 Cent handles his relationships compared to other major artists.
Yayo talking about, yeah, Jay don't take care of...
I just came off tour.
Right.
When have you seen Bleak on tour?
I don't need Jay to go on tour.
Yo, smoke hard coke,
Yo, chill.
He brought up Jay-Z as an example and made it clear that from what he's seen, 50 looks out for his people in a way that Jay just doesn't match. Yayo talked about how 50 encouraged the guys around him to be smart with their money, to invest, to buy property. He mentioned that Uncle Murda got his first house after linking up with G-Unit. He talked about how 50 gave him his first Jacob watch and then told him not to blow his head off spending recklessly. According to Yayo, that kind of mentorship and financial guidance was something 50 prioritized from the beginning. And then Yayo made the comparison that set everything off. He said that Jay-Z doesn't really take care of his people like that. He pointed to Memphis Bleak as an example, saying that 50 looked out for him way harder than Jay ever did for Bleak. Now Yayo was clear that he wasn't trying to disrespect Jay personally. He was just being honest about what he's observed over the years. But that honesty hit a nerve with a lot of people, and the clip from that interview started spreading everywhere. Social media immediately turned into a battlefield.
You spoke about how
Yeah, Jay don't look
they'll
out
look out for Bleak like Fifth look out for you.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I just want to clear that up. Hov don't have to.
And then he said he eats home halal.
You know what I mean? All right. Okay. I'm chewing halal on my own.
He eats on his own. I eat on my own too.
Right.
I go on my own too.
You had people saying Yayo was just stirring up unnecessary drama, while others were saying he finally said what everybody's been thinking for years. The debate was heating up, but it probably would have died down eventually if Jim Jones hadn't decided to insert himself into the conversation. Jim was doing a live chat with Memphis Bleak when he started going in on Yayo, and he wasn't being subtle about it either. Jim started clowning Yayo, calling him broke, saying he still depends on 50 to pay his bills. He made comments about Yayo's appearance, told him he needs to go to the dentist, said he looks like he needs help. The whole thing was meant to embarrass Yayo and defend Jay-Z's honor by attacking the person making the comparison. Jim was laughing while he said it, trying to play it off like it was all jokes, but the disrespect was obvious. The clip from that live went viral almost immediately. People were sharing it everywhere with captions like Jim Jones just violated Tony Yayo. But here's where it got interesting.
On the Jim Jones podcast, he had guest Memphis Bleak, and they shot at Tony Yayo. They shot back, actually, because on the Shay Shay show, Tony Yayo said, man, Jay-Z should take better care of his people.
A lot of the comments weren't actually siding with Jim. People started asking why Jim even felt the need to jump in when nobody was talking to him in the first place. The original conversation was about 50 and Jay, not about Jim Jones. So why was he so pressed about it? That's when Uncle Murda stepped in and completely shifted the narrative. Murda didn't waste any time. He came out and said something that immediately went viral. Jay got business partners, but 50 got brothers. That one line summarized everything people had been trying to articulate about the difference between how these two moguls operate. And it wasn't just a random observation from someone on the outside looking in. Uncle Murda has direct experience with both situations. He was signed to Roc-A-Fella for about a year before he walked away and linked up with 50 Cent. So when he speaks on this, he's speaking from actual lived experience. Murda made it clear that when he was with Roc-A-Fella, the relationship felt purely transactional. It was business. But when he got to G-Unit, everything changed.
He come to the office. I'm like, yo, who is this, Jay? He said, yo, shit, give me 10 bands if I bring him to you.
That part true, yeah?
2 minute conversation.
That's my man. That's my love, my right there.
You didn't have to seal the deal. 2 minute conversation.
50 kept him involved in music, brought him into business opportunities, and gave him public support whenever it mattered. Murda said that working with 50 is what finally allowed him to buy his first house. That's not a small thing. That's life-changing money and mentorship that actually translated into real stability. During a recent interview where both Uncle Murda and Tony Yayo were present, they doubled down on everything. Yayo talked about how 50 has been flying him out on world tours for 2 decades now. He said it's not even about the private jets or the expensive hotels. It's about the knowledge that 50 shares, the mentorship, the lessons about how to invest and secure your future beyond just music. According to Yayo, 50 never forgot who was with him when he was broke and grinding. Those same people are the ones he's rewarding now. And that's the key difference that Murda was highlighting. With 50, the loyalty goes both ways.
They wasn't sure what to do with him at Interscope, and that's why they signed him to G-Unit to give him some validation and some, you know what I mean? I remember that whole shit. I remember I was in the W, that whole shit, and he was telling me, yo, they about to sign me to G-Unit. You did, but...
If you were there when he had nothing, you're going to be there when he has everything. But with Jay, according to Murda, the dynamic is different. You're around when there's mutual benefit, and when that benefit runs out, you quietly fade from the picture. Now look, this is where the conversation gets complicated because not everyone agrees with Murda's assessment. A lot of Jay-Z supporters push back hard on this narrative. They pointed out that just because Jay doesn't post everything on social media doesn't mean he's not looking out for his people. They argued that Jay moves in silence, that he's a private person, and that making business decisions doesn't make you disloyal. Some people said Murda was being unfair by comparing 2 completely different business models and personalities. But here's the thing. When you look at Jay-Z's history, there's a pattern that's hard to ignore. Dame Dash was his business partner from the beginning of Roc-A-Fella, and we all know how that relationship ended. Kanye West was once one of Jay's closest collaborators, and now they don't speak. Beanie Sigel was supposed to be Jay's guy, and he's talked openly about feeling abandoned. Memphis Bleek has been loyal to Jay for decades, but you rarely see him getting the same kind of opportunities that artists in 50's camp seem to receive consistently.
Yo, chill. You look like you need to be taken care of. You look like you need to go to the dentist. You need to look like you need to brush your teeth. You look like you need hygiene.
Jay-Z is not a bad guy. Bleek is not a bad guy.
No.
I'm not saying it.
You look like you need help. Tell your man.
Then there's the Dayhaven situation. Dayhaven was one of Jay's oldest friends from the Marcy projects. They came up together in some of the hardest circumstances you can imagine. Dayhaven has done interviews where he says Jay completely cut him off once he went corporate. According to Dayhaven, Jay didn't just distance himself. He allegedly spread negative things about him and acted like they were strangers after years of friendship and sacrifice. That's a serious accusation, and it's one that adds to the perception that Jay's loyalty has an expiration date. And let's talk about Jazzo for a second. This is the man who literally gave Jay-Z his first shot in the music industry. Jazz was mentoring Jay, putting him on game, showing him how the industry worked before anyone else cared. And once Jay blew up, that relationship faded away. Jazz has spoken about this publicly, and it's another example that people point to when discussing Jay's approach to the people who helped him early on. Now, to be fair, we don't know all the details behind any of these situations. Relationships are complicated, and there's always more going on behind the scenes than what we see publicly. It's possible that in some of these cases there were legitimate reasons for the distance. But the pattern is what people notice. And when Uncle Murda makes a statement like Jay got business partners but 50 got brothers, it resonates because it matches what so many people have observed over the years. Meanwhile, when you look at 50's track record, the contrast is striking. The same guys who were shooting mixtape videos with him in Queens 20 years ago are still showing up at his events today. Lloyd Banks, Tony Yayo, Uncle Murda. These relationships have lasted through the ups and downs of careers, through beef, through industry changes. 50 puts his people in movies, on his television shows, into legitimate business opportunities. He's not just cutting checks, he's creating pathways for them to build their own wealth and careers. Tony Yayo talked about this specifically.
Just came off tour.
Right.
When have you seen Bleek on tour? On his own. Jay-Z is not a bad guy. Bleek is not a bad guy. I'm not saying it. I'm saying to you that Jay-Z was all business with them niggas. When Buck up on his taxes, 50 a piece or more. When Prodigy bought a house and needed more money, 50 a piece or more. Prodigy are paying back.
He said 50 doesn't just give you money, He teaches you how to think about money. He encourages you to invest, to buy property, to think long term. That kind of mentorship is arguably more valuable than any single paycheck, because it sets people up for sustained success rather than temporary fame. There's a clip that's been circulating where Yayo talks about being at a party with 50, where the Kardashians, Serena Williams, and other major celebrities were present. Yayo said the first thing he thought about was how Jay-Z never took him to anything like that. And then he corrected himself and said, okay, maybe he'd get invited to something, but the point was that 50 makes sure his people are in the room. It's not about excluding anyone. It's about making sure your day ones are eating with you at the highest levels. So where does Jim Jones fit into all of this? Honestly, that's the question a lot of people are asking. The original conversation was between Yayo and an interviewer about 50 and Jay. Jim wasn't mentioned. Nobody called his name. But he decided to jump in anyway. And the way he did it came across as desperate to a lot of fans. The internet was not kind to Jim after his comments went viral. People started bringing up old clips of Jim saying he's better than certain legendary rappers, and the reaction was pretty much universal disbelief. Comments were flooding in, calling Jim out for always inserting himself into situations that don't involve him just to stay relevant. One comment that got shared thousands of times said Jim Jones runs his mouth like he ran when somebody put hands on him. That's a reference to an incident from Jim's past that people still bring up whenever they want to question his credibility. There's also been talk about Jim having some kind of underlying issue with 50 Cent specifically. 50 Cent himself has mentioned in interviews that Jim seems to pop up around people who have problems with him, and that raises antennas. When you see someone consistently positioning themselves on the opposite side of whoever you're beefing with, it starts to look like more than coincidence. But regardless of Jim's motivations, the real takeaway from this whole situation is the conversation it sparked about loyalty in hip-hop. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is really about. It's not just about Jay versus 50. It's about two completely different philosophies on how to handle success and the people who helped you achieve it. One approach is to treat relationships as business arrangements. You work together when it makes sense, and when it no longer makes sense, you move on. There's nothing inherently wrong with that approach. It's how a lot of successful people operate in every industry. But it can feel cold, especially in hip-hop, where the culture was built on crew loyalty and coming up together from nothing. The other approach is to prioritize the people who were with you from the beginning, regardless of whether the business math always makes sense. You keep them around because they earned that spot through years of loyalty and sacrifice. You make sure they eat because you remember when none of you were eating. That approach might not always be the most efficient business strategy, but it builds something that money can't buy, which is genuine trust and lifelong bonds. Uncle Murda clearly believes in the second approach, and his experience has shown him the difference between the two. When he says Jay got business partners and 50 got brothers, he's not just throwing shade. He's making an observation based on years of being in both environments. And whether you agree with his conclusion or not, you have to admit the conversation he started is worth having. The internet is still going back and forth on this one. Some people are defending Jay's legacy and saying that his business success speaks for itself. Others are pointing to example after example of people who were once close to Jay and are now completely out of the picture. And in the middle of all of it, Jim Jones is getting roasted for jumping into a conversation nobody invited him to. So what do you think about all of this? Is Uncle Murda right about the difference between how Jay and 50 move? Does Jim Jones have any room to talk considering his own career trajectory? And ultimately, is it better to move with loyalty or strategy when you reach the top? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure you hit that like button if you found this breakdown interesting, and subscribe if you want to stay up on everything happening in hip-hop. I'll catch you in the next one.